Oh, that was almost really awkward. Welcome back, Steve. Hi, I'm Faf, or Matt. Church has got a bit of a buzz about it this morning, which is really nice. I'm going to be reading from Hebrews chapter 2, verses 5 to 18. So if you have a church Bible, that's page 968. And if you want a church Bible, they're just up at the back corner there near the door. So Hebrews chapter 2, verses 5 to 18. It is not to angels that he has subjected the world to come, about which we are speaking. But there is a place where someone has testified, "What is mankind that you are mindful of them, a son of man that you care for him? You made them a little lower than the angels. You crowned them with glory and honour and put everything under their feet." In putting everything under them, God left nothing that is not subject to them. Yet at present we do not see everything subject to them. But we do see Jesus, who was made lower than the angels for a little while, now crowned with glory and honour because he suffered death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. In bringing many sons and daughters to glory, it was fitting that God, for whom and through whom everything exists, should make the pioneer of their salvation perfect through what he suffered. Both the one who makes people holy and those who are made holy are of the same family. So Jesus is not ashamed to call them brothers and sisters. He says, "I will declare your name to my brothers and sisters. In the assembly I will sing your praises." And again, "I will put my trust in him." And again he says, "Here am I, and the children God has given me." Since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might break the power of him who holds the power of death, that is, the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. For surely it is not angels he helps, but Abraham's descendants. For this reason he had to be made like them, fully human in every way, in order that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in service to God, and that he might make atonement for the sins of the people. Because he himself suffered when he was tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks, Faf. You might like to have Hebrews 2 open there. We're going to look at that. And thanks for reading, Faf. Peggy and I came up with a plan because on the run sheet we couldn't see who the Bible reader was. So we thought, let's play it really smoothly. And if no one gets up, I'll just get up without notice. And anyway, now I've drawn a lot of attention to that. Do keep that open. We've been working our way through the book of Hebrews for the last 3 weeks. And if you're a Christian person or not, this is a great book to read because it just takes you right to the centre of the Christian faith. Every chapter is really about the supremacy of Christ, the greatness of Christ. It really will take you to the heart of what Christianity is all about. Let me pray, and then we're going to get into Hebrews 2. Father, we thank you that you've given us the scriptures that we might hear and see Jesus as he really is crowned with glory and honour. This Jesus who stooped down to become one of us and one for us, who tasted death on our behalf, who took the penalty of our sin, who rose to real resurrected life and ascended to your right hand where he reigns now. We pray that you'd help each of us to see him again this morning. Amen. Chapter 2 of Hebrews will take us right to the heart of who Jesus is. And in doing that, what it really does is shows us what it is to be human. And I don't know about you, but when was the last time you actually stopped and thought hard, what is it to be a human being? When I finished high school, I did that thing many high school students do, have just drifted my way through. I had no idea what I wanted to do. So what did I do? I enrolled in an arts degree at Sydney Uni and then filled my time with all sorts of obscure... So I learned Welsh for a whole year. And I've forgotten it, so I can't speak to you in Welsh anymore. But in my first year, I enrolled in a subject called anthropology, which at the time I thought was a study of ants. Like I literally thought it was a study of ants. And then in the first lecture, when I was told it comes from the Greek word anthropos, humanity. It's a study of humanity. And I wasn't a Christian at that point, but somewhere along that next year or two, I realised I've never really thought about this, what it is to be human. And I wonder if you have. What is it to be a human being? Hebrews 2 taps into a baseline of scriptural reflection on what that is to be human. And it does it in a fascinating way. It kind of redefines the way the scriptures talk about that and recenters it in around Jesus. So what we're going to do this morning is really simple. We're going to wade through that passage pretty slowly, and an Old Testament passage which is kind of lurking in the background of that, Psalm 8. And then we're going to notice 3 things about Jesus: that he's king, champion and brother, and 3 achievements that he brings for us that we benefit from. So if you've got it there, have a look. The author begins by meditating on Psalm 8, which is this grand passage in the Old Testament. And if you're new to exploring the Christian faith, I think there's a handful of Old Testament passages you might want to just look at, which are kind of purple passages. And this is one of them. It's this grand picture of what it is to be human. And Psalm 8, I'm going to read from it, not so much the author of Hebrews version of it here, but in Psalm 8 in the Old Testament, it begins in a very human way by looking up at the heavens and being struck by the grandeur of it all, and then reflecting on who we are. So it says in verse 3, "When I consider the work that your heavens and the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you've set in place, what is mankind that you're mindful of them? Human beings that you care for them." I'll bet each of us to some degree have done that in your life. You've been hit by the majesty of the creation, and it makes you wonder. It's a very human experience. We had this recently, many of you will know, we were camping in far north Queensland, and one night we were in the outback in a place called Undara, which is this volcanic national park. It's an incredible part of the country I'd never heard of, just stunning. And we were lying on a rock late at night looking up at the stars, and we just got this photo from an iPhone. It's incredible, just the technology we have now. This is the Milky Way, and we were just struck at how small we are. And I'll bet each of us, to some degree, have had that experience. And my experience is watching people have that experience, almost always they land in one of 2 camps. They see the hugeness of the creation and think, we are nothing, we mean nothing. Well, they see the majesty of the creation and think, wow, who am I that God would care for me? A few years ago, there was when the James Webb telescope was kind of launched and sending back these incredible photos of the galaxy, just the little fraction of it that we can see. Everyone was hit by the enormity of it. And I saw this just played out on social media. A friend of mine from school, who I still keep up with, shared this photo of the James Webb telescope, which showed just a slice of all the known universe that we can see. And it just stretches on and on. But his landing point was, we mean nothing. We're irrelevant. I also had a Christian friend share that exact same photo on Facebook and landed in the other side, said, and the Psalm 8 landing point, who are we that God would care for us? The scriptures, Psalm 8, all throughout the scriptures, Hebrews 2, do this. They take us to the majesty of the creation. It calls us to reflect on the power and majesty of the Creator, and land at a very profound point that human beings matter, that actually we are made with real dignity and destiny. The scriptures talk about this as us being made as God's image bearers. That is, the creation has been made, to use the language of Psalm 8, to be subject to human rule and blessing, not that we are tyrants, but that we steward it and care for it and nurture it, and in that way, as God's image bearers, reflect his rule and blessing to the whole creation. This is Christian Anthropology 101, that you matter. God has a plan for your life, a great plan. You have real dignity and destiny, but I'll bet you're also wondering at the same time, but I don't see it. What I see is the creation groaning. It's frustrated. It's not in harmony with human beings. So things like climate change are just a very real thing. We see injustice. We experience our own capacity to self-sabotage our happiness all the time. So we don't see that Psalm 8 reality lived out. And Hebrews 2, if you've got it there, is brutally honest at this point. It says in verse 8, I don't see it either. Have a look at that in verse 8. It says, in putting everything under them, that is under humanity, God left nothing that is not subject to them. Yet at present, we do not see everything subject to them. That last sentence is incredibly important. Yet at present, we don't see everything subject to humanity. You see the honesty of the author here? It's almost as if he's saying, I've read Psalm 8, I believe it, but I don't see it. What I see is the world groaning. And the scriptures frequently help you examine yourself and the world honestly. That we are creatures of incredible dignity and destiny. We have an amazing capacity for good and an incredible capacity for garbage. We do frequently self-sabotage our own happiness in our workplace, in the way we experience the creation in our relationships. We call that sin, where our desires for ourselves trump the desires of others. We also experience, though, the sin and injustice of others and see the world not in harmony, but it's groaning all the time in a way that makes us question, who are we? What hope is there? There's a problem here. I heard a sermon a little while ago by an American pastor, Tim Keller, on the incarnation of Jesus, which we're looking at really today, that the eternal Son of God humbled himself and took on our flesh. And he shared a story in that sermon of a horrific crime that took place in New York in 1965. It was one of those crimes that shook the city to its core and made people question their humanity. There was a young bartender called Kitty Genovese who came home from work about 2 a.m, making her way to her apartment where she was attacked and robbed and screaming out for help. The attacker left for 10 minutes, but was within earshot. And when he realised no one was coming down to help, he came back and murdered her and took the rest of her money. In the ensuing weeks, so the story goes, as the New York Times reported it, as the detectives did their work, they found out that 38 people heard Kitty Genevieve's cries for help, and no one stooped down. And it had that effect on the city of questioning, who are we? Creatures with such dignity and destiny, goodness, but also garbage. Hebrews 2 here takes us right to the heart. What do we see when we look at humanity? There's a problem. We don't see that reality of Psalm 8 in all its fullness. But what does the author see? Look at verse 9. He says, but we do see Jesus, who was made lower than the angels for a little while, now crowned with glory and honour because he suffered death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. What does the author see in Jesus? Here he gives us a particular angle of Jesus' identity. He sees a human who does it. A human in whom we can look at and go, there is one to follow. There is one who lives and rules with dignity, perfectly all the time. He's crowned with glory and honour. Christian anthropology actually doesn't just begin at Psalm 8 or Genesis 1 and 2. At the heart of it, it is to look at Jesus as the true human being. He's the archetypal human person you can look at and go, that's what it is to be human. So just as a sidebar, examine the way you use the language of human nature. I don't know if you find yourself doing this. I still catch myself out doing this. I see my own imperfections, my own capacity for garbage, and sometimes I might just dismiss it as, well, I'm just a human. Or I might see those big gaps in our justice system and explain it away. That's true human? No, it's not. True human nature is the beauty and dignity we see lived out perfectly in Jesus. Anything else is a corruption of that. When you look at Jesus like the author of Hebrews does, when you have that verse 9 moment, but I see Jesus, what do you see? And if you're struggling to see him, there's just 3 things I want to point out that come out of this passage really clearly. The first is that he's king. So the author here uses this language. He is crowned with glory and honour. The crown of glory and honour that should be ours, that destiny of humanity, it actually is his. And in his incarnation, his stooping down to be one with us and one for us, his death, his resurrection, and then his ascension into heaven, which just really happened, something changes. This true human, the king, is crowned. You might say, and if you're here the first week, we looked at Hebrews when Ben preached, we looked at just the first 4 verses, which take us back to Jesus' pre-existence when he lived with the Father, the eternal Son of God. And it says things like, the whole creation was made through him, it was made for him. He's always been king in that sense, but something new happens in his ascension to the Father's right hand. And that new thing that happens is it's God's tick of approval. This is the king. This is the king who laid down his life on behalf of others, because that's what true kings do, right? They don't stand aloof and rule as tyrants. They stoop down to be with their people. He resurrected to new life. And the vindication of that, the tick that he is who he says he is, that his crowning achievement did something, is that he's ascended into heaven and now rules. He's crowned with glory and honor. He's our king. And like all good kings who rule with dignity, who live out their destiny, he's our champion. This is what kings do. They represent their people. They don't just rule from afar, they stoop down. And here Jesus shows his greatness using the language of Hebrews 2. He's far superior than the angels. And there's a bit of a paradox here. He shows his superiority to the angels, not just in that he's their creator and he created all things, but in his willingness to stoop down and become lower than them. That is, he took on human flesh. And when he did that, it's like he's rolling his sleeves up and saying, I get it. I know what it is to be human. I've lived it. I've walked it. I've been in your skin. In every way, the author says later on, he gets what it is to be you and to be me, to be human. This is a beautifully unique truth of the Christian faith, that our God is not aloof, but he gets dirty in the creation, if I could put it like that. He knows what it is to be human. There's an illustration I heard many years ago trying to make this point, comparing the Christian faith to different worldviews or faiths, and it portrayed humanity as stuck in a pit. And various people walk past and they say things like, you're in a pit, and then they just keep walking. Oh, thanks, mate. Or they might say things like, you're in a pit, work your way out, just be a better person, you'll get yourself out of that pit. That's basically what many worldviews or religions say, but Christianity, so the illustration goes, is different. God enters into the pit in Jesus Christ. It's true-ish. It's half of it. He does enter the pit. He knows what it is to be human. He's taken on our flesh and forever will be a human, the King, but he's our champion. And he doesn't just get us, he gets us out of the pit. So 4 times here in this passage, we're going to look at these just really slowly. 4 times we see that Jesus, acting as our King, is our champion, and being our champion, his crowning work achieves something. You see it firstly, verse 9. Have a look with me. The author says, but we do see Jesus, who was made lower than the angels for a little while, now crowned with glory and honour because he suffered death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. He's our champion. He represents us all the way, even to death, for you and for me, for everyone. Verse 10, in bringing many sons and daughters to glory, it was fitting that God, for whom and through whom everything exists, should make the pioneer of their salvation perfect through what he suffered. He suffered as our champion on behalf of each of us. Verse 14, he too shared in their humanity so that by his death he might break the power of him who holds the power of death, that is the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. In verse 17, for this reason he had to be made like them, fully human in every way, in order that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in service to God, and that he might make atonement for the sins of the people. Those 4 verses make a compelling case that Jesus, as our King and champion, actually achieves something with explosive power. he really has changed your destiny as a human. He acts on our behalf like a true champion ought. He steps in for us on the cross to fight our biggest battles, which turn out not to be our health issues or our financial woes or climate change, but our biggest battles of sin and death. The author says he tasted death for us, with the implication being because and tasted maybe is a little too weak. He drained that cup so that you might drink from the cup of life. He suffered, carried your sins to the cross so that you will now live in perfect peace. So the author says here, in his death, a great sacrifice has been made. He's a priest making a sacrifice which is his body taken so that you might have life. You're atoned for now. You're at one with your Creator. He's our King. He's our champion. But with beautiful intimacy, this passage also says he's your brother. You notice the way the family language is used all throughout here? Yeah, he's the king. He's above the angels. He created them. The whole creation is for him. He's the champion who represents us even to the point of death. And he's your brother. You know the story of Cinderella? There's various iterations of this story in many different cultures, dating back to the 7th century BC. Is where the earliest origins of this story come. But the story basically is about a young woman who's treated terribly by her stepsisters. They bully her and keep her on the outer of the family. But magically, she goes to a ball where she meets the prince who falls in love with her. And then somehow he finds her. And what happens at the end of the story, she's brought into this new home, this new family. She has the royal robe, she has the royal name, she lives in the royal palace, she gets the royal inheritance. I love how Peggy began our service. This was not planned, but encouraging us to see church as home, because this is what Jesus does as our King and our champion. He's also your brother, and he welcomes you home. He says, these are not just my underlings, these are my sisters and my brothers. We belong together. And you know what happens when you have a brother like that? You share in his stuff. So when he's crowned with glory and honour, we too are crowned with glory and honour, not because of our capacity for goodness, because actually we know how flawed that is, but because of him. And in him we have it. And I love that we're a church home, a family made up of various different cultures. I know for many of us, part of our story is growing up in cultures where caste systems are a very real thing, where just by virtue of your surname or the area you live in, there's a system. And some of us are born and raised in a culture where we're just looked down upon by others. And with that comes all sorts of shame and sometimes honour if you're just on the higher run. Notice here how beautifully Jesus enters into that experience. This one who is so far above all stoops down with great humility and welcomes you in as your brother, as your sister. He's one with us and one for us. There's so much more we could say here, but I hope you can see this in Hebrews 2. Jesus is King, he's champion, he's your brother. And for each of us, that means 3 things that really genuinely will change your life. The first is that he will set you free. The language here in chapter 2, when it talks about the devil, and just as an aside, if you're exploring the Christian faith, you do need to know we really believe in things like God and the devil. And it would just be worth exploring if you've come to church with an assumption that a belief in an evil being or a devil is just childish. Let's talk about that over morning tea. But the scriptures are just really clear about this. And it's clear here in the scriptures that the devil has a real power, that is to enslave people to the fear of death. But what Jesus, acting as our King, champion and brother, does is sets us free from that fear of death. Never to downplay it. This is a mistake that many Christians, I think, can fall into, that because we believe Jesus has set us free from death, therefore we just dismiss death off as a light-hearted matter. It's not. I think the author here speaks with real honesty. Death is awful. It's of the devil. It's a corruption of God's created goodness. It has a use-by date. When he returns and the creation is perfectly subject to the one crowned with glory and honour, it won't exist anymore. So we need not be shy in saying death sucks. But what I've found in my work as a minister is sometimes I'm invited into that very sacred, privileged space of being with families as a family member is dying. You can just see what it looks like to be cut free from that power of the fear of death. I had this experience on Thursday. It just dawned on me. On Thursday, I met with two people who were dying, and in between met our newest congregation member, Benjamin Powell, Tom and Jess's little boy. He was born just a few days earlier. It was one of those experiences of just realising all of our life is lived in the shadow of death. And sitting with these families who are seeing loved ones just hours away from death, you can see this stuff of what it looks like to go to death still enslaved in fear, or to be set free. Not to downplay death, it's horrible. We need not be shy about that. But our King and Champion and Brother has set us free from the fear of it. Secondly, we're brought in. So if you have come to church this morning feeling unknown, or maybe your experience of church has been a dissatisfying one, you don't feel like you're known and loved and seen by other people, do take to heart you have a brother who sees you. In every way, he gets what it's like to be you. We're all beautifully unique, but you're all beautifully seen and totally understood by him, and he welcomes you in as your big brother. And lastly, briefly, he shows us here what true greatness looks like. And if, like me, you've eked your way through life without ever really thinking, what is it to be human? Or where do I look at to understand what it is to be me? Look at Jesus. And particularly here, he shows you what it is to be a great human. The perfect human, actually. The story of the scriptures might sound strange at first, and if you want to understand who you are, don't look at yourself. Look at him first. But it's beautifully liberating if you can do that, because you see your King and Champion crowned with glory and honour, the one to whom all things are being brought under his feet perfectly. And in that you see a kind of greatness that your heart will ache for. That true human greatness, it turns out, is shown in things like suffering on behalf of others, in humility and service and love and welcome. You and I can't do that. We can't do that for 5 minutes. He's done it perfectly on our behalf. And I don't know about you, but when I see these things, it makes me want to follow him. Because I see a king and a champion and a brother who's not a tyrant, but who acts with great humility and love. And it makes me want to say, I'll follow you in life and follow you through death. Let me pray. Father, would you give us the eyes of faith to see Jesus as he really is, crowned with glory and honour, the King of Kings, this champion who's acted on our behalf out of great love, and our brother who welcomes us in. Free each of us up, even now, as we reflect on your words, as we sing, to have the eyes of faith to see him, to be set free, to know that we're called home, and to follow him.